Hey everyone, I wanted to get on here today to talk a little bit about using fear in order to drive your passions and actually move yourself forward in this reality. So, everybody talks about how fear is a bad thing, how fear, has been controlling people for a long time. But really and truly, fear is your body's response to different things, and it's also, a natural response. It's a response to making sure that you're safe and protected out here. So when you learn that you naturally are supposed to have fear, then it takes away a little bit of that bias that you might have. When we are fearing something, now it can come from somebody else or something outside of ourselves that is creating that fear. But we have to learn how to distinguish between the fear that's coming from somebody else or the fear that's coming from inside of us that is showing us how to keep ourselves protected and keep ourselves on our path and on this journey that we call life. Because you can use that fear to recognize different opportunities, to recognize different situations that are happening to you in order to move forward and make a better decision. And when I say a better decision, I mean a decision that's more aligned with your truest self, more aligned with your highest self. So you have to learn how to use all these things that, has been said to be a negative aspect of life. Fear is not anything that, no, for lack the pun of, fear is nothing to be afraid of. We have to accept that fear, accept that it's there. There's always going to be things that makes us afraid. There's always going to be things that, will, trigger that response inside of us, to make us be like, oh man, what are we doing? How are we going to get there? And also make us worry, bring up different emotions and stuff in our life. But once you get to the point of noticing this fear and knowing that, this is just another response that the body has, this is another response that we have in this 3D experience, then you could use that fear in order to drive your passions. You can use that fear to recognize your opportunities. Be like, oh man, I'm afraid of making this investment, or I'm afraid of stepping out there to start my own business, or I'm afraid of applying for this job, or I'm afraid to go out here and talk to this person. I'm afraid for this. Why are you afraid? Is it because of what society has put on you? Is it because of society's, standards of what you should have? Or is it something inside of you saying, oh, that person might be a danger to me? Or is this situation going to be harmful to me? Because that's what fear originally was for. It was to let us know the dangers that were around us. And that's not a bad thing. That's a natural thing. That's a beautiful thing. But fear has turned into this crazy, big, for lack of a better word, conspiracy to control people and make people do things that they wouldn't normally do, act out of themselves, get away from their truest self. You see where I'm going with this? So you have to recognize where this fear is coming from. Is this fear something that's actually going to help me, move forward? Is this fear something that, is for my protection? Or is this fear something that is based off of somebody else's perception, somebody else's reality? Or is that fear coming from within me to let me know where I'm going? Now, fear can also be used, with your spiritual practices, because once you start noticing where that fear is coming from, you can identify the different aspects within yourself that are creating this fear. Is this something that was programmed from me from a child? Is this something from a past trauma? Is this going to be something that happened, earlier in my life, or something that I'm afraid will happen in the future? Because, time, when we talk about past, present, and future, say they all just exist in the mind. So all this stuff that's happening, from that fear of something that happened in the past, it's not happening right now. So remember that, we are here in this present moment. So you got to recognize, is that fear something from this present moment, or is that fear something in the past? Is that fear from somewhere that basically we have brought up, from an outside source? And then once you start learning how to recognize these different things, you'll be able to then alchemize it, transmute it into something more powerful. You're like, okay, I'm afraid to start my own business. Why am I afraid? I'm afraid of not being successful. I'm afraid of that it's not going to work. But how will you know if you don't try? Practice makes perfect. Everybody knows that phrase. Practice makes perfect. So you have to practice using that fear to drive you forward. You have to practice, taking that fear and using that to drive something else. You're like, I'm afraid that, I'm not going to be able to accomplish whatever I want to accomplish. Well, use that fear. It's like, okay, I'm afraid to do it. Well, let me use all that energy, all that fear that I was getting, and go ahead and do it. Let me use that as a motivation to keep it moving, to keep it pushing. And you don't have to stop this at any point in time. No, this is not only just with fear. No, this video right here, I'm talking about fear, but this can be applied to any of those negative emotions that people talk about. Anger, hostility, jealousy, wrath, envy. You could use these emotions in order to learn and take that as a learning experience on this spiritual journey. So just take a little bit to think about that and see what comes up.